Welcome to World Alert Updates. Subscribe and press the bell icon for more updates. In 2022, a headline stunned the financial world. Heirs of the long-lost Sultanate of Sulu seized billions in Malaysian assets in Luxembourg. This was no fiction. It was the climax of a centuries-old dispute over Sabah, Malaysia's resource-rich state on Borneo. The Sulu heirs claimed Malaysia broke a 19th-century promise. Sabah was leased, not sold, and Malaysia stopped paying the annual fee in 2013. They took their case to international arbitration, and a French court awarded them nearly $15 billion. The judgment shocked Malaysia and the Philippines, turning a forgotten historical claim into a modern geopolitical crisis. The Sulu heirs, once relics of the past, had become major players, forcing the world to reconsider the lines that define nations. For Malaysia, the asset seizure was an attack on sovereignty. For the Philippines, it was a diplomatic dilemma. For Sabah's 4 million people, it was a source of deep uncertainty. The dispute had exploded onto the global stage, exposing the lingering power of colonial-era agreements. The world was now watching as a quiet corner of Borneo became the center of a storm. This is the story of how a forgotten sultanate shook Southeast Asia, and why the fate of Sabah still hangs in the balance. The ghosts of colonialism are not done with us yet. The Sulu heirs' bold move was more than a claim for money. It was a statement about identity, justice, and the unfinished business of history. The world waits to see how this story of sultans, treaties, and treasure will end. To understand Sabah's dispute, we must go back to the 19th century, when colonial ambitions collided in Southeast Asia. The Sultanate of Sulu, a maritime power, once ruled parts of the southern Philippines and Borneo. In the 1700s, the Sultan of Brunei, facing rebellion, ceded North Borneo, now Sabah, to the Sultan of Sulu in exchange for military help. This transfer, rooted in oral tradition, is the foundation of the Philippine claim. The British North Borneo Company later sought to legitimize its presence by striking a deal with the Sultan of Sulu. The resulting agreement would become the heart of today's conflict. Colonial deals were often ambiguous, drafted by Europeans with different legal traditions and priorities. The British blurred the lines between commerce and colonization, setting the stage for disputes that would last centuries. The story of Sabah is a classic example of how a single document can shape the destiny of millions. A piece of paper from a different era still divides two nations today. The Sabah dispute hinges on a single document signed in 1878 between the Sultan of Sulu and the British North Borneo Company. The British version says cede, a sale. The Malay version says pajak, a lease. For the Sulu heirs in the Philippines, this means the Sultan never sold Sabah, only leased it for an annual fee. If it was a lease, sovereignty was never truly transferred, and the British had no right to give Sabah to Malaysia. In 1963, Malaysia continued annual payments until 2013, when violence in Sabah led them to stop. The Sulu heirs saw this as a breach of the lease, prompting their international legal campaign. The entire crisis flows from the contested meaning of one word, written nearly 150 years ago. The difference between CD and lease is not just semantics, it's the legal and moral foundation of the Philippine claim. The modern crisis is a direct result of this unresolved ambiguity. The pact of paper has become a source of deep division. The fate of Sabah still hangs on the translation of a single word. The world is left to interpret a document that changed everything. The legacy of colonial paperwork continues to haunt Southeast Asia. Malaysia's stance is clear. Sabah is an inseparable part of its federation. They argue that the 1878 agreement, whatever its wording, was superseded by decades of British administration and, most importantly, by the will of Sabah's people. In 1962, the Cobbled Commission found most Sabahans wanted to join Malaysia, a result later confirmed by a UN mission. Malaysia sees this act of self-determination as the ultimate legitimizer, overriding any ancient claims. For over 60 years, Sabah has been governed, developed, and integrated into Malaysia. The people vote, hold Malaysian passports, and are represented in parliament. For Malaysia, the Sulu heirs' claim is a relic of the past, a threat to stability, not a legitimate legal contest. The dispute, they argue, is a distraction from the real work of building Sabah's future. The foundation of Malaysia, they insist, is not up for negotiation. The Philippines sees its claim to Sabah as a matter of historical justice and national identity. They argue the 1878 agreement was a lease, not a sale, and that the British had no right to transfer Sabah to Malaysia. In 1962, the Sulu heirs ceded their rights to the Philippine government, making the claim official policy. Manila has never recognized Malaysia's sovereignty over Sabah, and the issue remains a persistent source of diplomatic friction. The Philippines frames the dispute as correcting a colonial injustice, land leased by a local ruler, then handed off by foreign powers. The recent actions of the Sulu heirs have reignited the issue, forcing the Philippines to choose between history and modern diplomacy. For Manila, the claim is about more than land. It's about national pride and unfinished business. The question remains, pursue the claim or prioritize regional stability? Lost in the legal battles are the voices of Sabah's nearly 4 million people. Sabah is a mosaic of over 30 indigenous groups, plus Chinese and Malay communities. For more than 60 years, Sabahans have been Malaysians, building their lives and identities within the Federation. Most feel a stronger connection to Kuala Lumpur than to Manila. The idea of joining the Philippines is foreign to many. Yet, there are grievances. Many Sabahans feel shortchanged by the federal government, fueling calls for greater autonomy, not secession. The presence of Filipino migrants adds complexity, but also reinforces Sabahans' desire to maintain their distinct identity. For Sabahans, the real issues are economic opportunity, cultural survival, and fair treatment, not a centuries-old territorial claim. Their future is shaped by daily realities, not distant treaties. The debate over Sabah's fate often ignores the people who live there. Their voices must be at the center of any solution. Transferring Sabah from Malaysia to the Philippines would be a seismic, destabilizing event. Any attempt to enforce the claim could trigger violent conflict between two ASEAN members, with catastrophic human costs. Redrawing borders based on colonial-era treaties would set a dangerous precedent, inviting similar disputes worldwide. The economic fallout would be severe, decades of investment and property rights thrown into chaos. Sabah's diverse communities would face forced assimilation, new legal systems, and potential ethnic tensions. Instead of resolving injustice, a transfer could create new cycles of conflict and suffering. The risks, war, instability, economic collapse, are simply too high. The principle of stable borders is a cornerstone of international order. The world cannot afford to open this Pandora's box. The endless debate over old treaties distracts from the real issue, the right to self-determination. The future of Sabah should be decided by Sabahans, not by colonial ghosts or distant politicians. Malaysia argues this right was exercised in 1963, but a new generation has grown up since then. A lasting solution requires acknowledging that ultimate authority rests with those living on the land today. The path forward is a new dialogue, one that respects the will of Sabah's people. Perhaps this means an internationally supervised referendum, letting Sabahans choose their future. Malaysia and the Philippines must have the courage to accept the outcome, whatever it may be. ASEAN and the international community should ensure the process is fair and transparent. Moving beyond the treaties of the past is difficult, but it's the only way to a just and sustainable peace. The people of Sabah must be the ones to close this chapter of history. In 2025, the Sabah dispute is once again in the spotlight, forcing Southeast Asia to confront its past. The real question, whose voice matters most? The sultans of history, the governments of today, or the people of Sabah? Imposing a historical claim now would ignore 60 years of identity and integration. The true injustice would be denying Sabahans the right to determine their own destiny. The conversation must shift from who owns Sabah to what do Sabahans want. A peaceful resolution means honoring both history and the present, ensuring Sabah's prosperity and self-determination. The story of Sabah must become one of a people charting their own course. Their voices are the only truth that matters now.